what if I told you that staring at a blank AI chat box is actually like the absolute most inefficient way to use artificial intelligence?
I mean, it really is. It's
Yeah.
totally backwards.
Right. So today, we are killing the blank prompt. I want you listening right now to picture a very specific and probably very familiar scenario. It's uh it's Friday at 5 p.m.
Oh, no. I know where this is going.
Yeah, you're completely exhausted.
Yeah.
And you just got handed a 200-page subcontract, and you need to pull a detailed departures register before you can go home.
The Friday afternoon nightmare.
Exactly. So you open up your AI assistant, and you just face that blinking cursor, and you have to start typing out this massive, exhaustive paragraph, like, act as a senior contract administrator, review this document against this specific standard.
Formatted in a table, right.
Right. Don't forget to highlight the risk areas. And you have to do this exhausting mental gymnastics every single time you need to perform the task.
Because the friction in that process is just enormous. When you force yourself to be a prompt engineer from scratch every single morning, you're burning cognitive energy on the setup.
Instead of the actual execution.
Exactly. And this incredibly high barrier to entry is, well, it's the primary reason why we see professionals try generative AI tools for a week, get frustrated by the inconsistent results, and ultimately just abandon them.
Which is exactly why you're going to want to pull up a chair and lean in for this deep dive. Because today, we're unpacking a highly specialized training framework.
And it's one specifically designed for the construction industry, focusing heavily on workflow automation.
Right, specifically on what are known as Claude skills. Our mission for this deep dive is to demystify how you can take all that repetitive, tedious manual prompting and completely eliminate it.
Just wipe it out entirely.
Exactly. We're going to explore how to turn those complex instructions into reusable, one-click automated actions, going from a casual user who is constantly typing out raw instructions to a master workflow architect.
And, while the immediate environment of the material we're analyzing today is centered on heavy construction sites, joint ventures, project management, the underlying mechanics apply to absolutely anyone listening.
Oh, 100%.
Whether you're in corporate finance, healthcare, or marketing. If you are bogged down by repetitive cognitive tasks, this applies to you. Because the core philosophy here is about productionizing your knowledge.
Productionizing your knowledge. I love the weight of that phrase. It really hits. And the overarching tagline for this entire methodology really sets the tone for our conversation. It goes like this: build it once, run it forever, improve it always.
That is the ultimate shift in perspective. If you find yourself doing the same comparative analysis or generating the same weekly compliance report over and over, starting from zero is no longer an option.
You have to build a system.
Right. You need to build a system.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can start architecting these systems, we need to define the fundamental unit of currency we're dealing with here. What actually is a skill in this context?
Yeah, the term can sound a bit nebulous to people.
It really does.
So, think of a skill as a perfectly preserved cognitive environment. Technically speaking, it's a saved configuration.
Okay.
It takes your highly refined system prompt, your necessary background context, and your specific task instructions, and packages them all into a single deployable text file.
So it's almost like,
It's basically a highly advanced AI macro.
let's look at that subcontract review scenario you mentioned earlier.
Right, my Friday afternoon nightmare.
Without a skill, you're manually feeding the AI the context window every single time. You're defining your role, citing the legal standard, outlining your focus areas.
Begging it to use the right table format.
Yes. But with a skill, that entire configuration is locked in. You simply click a button labeled Subcontract Reviewer, paste in the new raw contract, and you instantaneously receive a structured departures register.
Because the prompt engineering was done weeks ago.
Exactly. It's your absolute best, most rigorously tested set of instructions, ready to run with zero friction. Sitting here listening to the mechanics of this, it feels exactly like meal prepping for your AI.
Oh, I like that.
Right. When you cook dinner from scratch every single night, you're dragging out the cutting board, you're crying over chopped onions, you're measuring out tiny spoons of spices.
It's messy.
It is. You're doing all this raw, messy prep work just to get to the actual meal. And that is what writing a manual prompt is. But building a skill is like taking a quiet Sunday afternoon to cook a massive, perfect batch of your favorite recipe.
You do the hard work exactly once.
Exactly once. You package it up into neat containers, Then, on a chaotic Tuesday night when you're just starved for results, you hit a single button on the microwave.
The brilliance of that analogy is that it really highlights the shift in human capital. By shifting from daily cooking to meal prepping, you fundamentally change the nature of the human worker's role.
How?
Well, you elevate the professional from constant manual data entry to a position of strategic oversight. You are no longer the line cook frantically chopping vegetables. You are the executive chef standing at the pass, ensuring the dishes coming out of the kitchen meet your exact quality standards.
Right. You're managing the output, not micromanaging the input. But, and I can practically hear you, the listener, thinking to yourself right now, all right, the meal prep sounds amazing, but meal prepping itself takes a massive amount of time.
Right, they're wondering if they have to build all these complex tools from scratch.
Exactly. Am I really expected to do all that?
And the answer is no. You do not have to start from an empty pantry. This methodology introduces a foundational layer known as the Contractor OS library.
Okay, let's clarify that term for a second, because when people hear OS, they immediately think of an operating system like, Windows or Mac OS.
It's a vital distinction. In this context, Contractor OS is not literal software you install on your computer.
Okay, so what is it?
It's an operating system in terms of methodology. It's a repository of pre-built, community-tested skills that are specifically engineered for heavy industry workflows, ready for immediate deployment.
Let's ground this with some visceral examples for the listener. The framework lists several heavy-duty tools, like you have the contract reviewer, which generates that departures register we talked about.
Right.
But you also have a bid requirements extractor. And anyone who has dealt with tender documents knows the absolute pain of finding hidden pricing impacts buried in hundreds of pages of legal fluff.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. And the library extends much further into daily operations too. For example, there's an EOT or extension of time notice builder.
Which is notoriously difficult.
Extremely, because it requires turning raw, emotional site observations and scattered weather reports into a formal, legally binding notice. Then there's an NCR drafter, which takes rough field notes and structures them into professional nonconformance reports. And a daily report analyzer that just scans through mundane daily logs to automatically flag potential variation events that a busy project manager might have completely missed.
See, these aren't your basic write me a polite email prompts. These are highly specific, professional-grade instruments. So what does this all mean? If these battle-tested skills already exist on a digital shelf, at least for construction, it really feels like the era of the blank chat box is officially dead.
I would agree.
I want you to imagine what a library like this looks like for your specific industry. The days of logging on and asking an AI, hey, can you help me look at the spreadsheet, are just over.
We've essentially crossed the threshold from prompt generation to tool selection. The blank chat box demands that the user be an expert prompt engineer every single time they log in.
Which is exhausting.
But a skills library. It only requires the user to understand their own business process enough to pull the correct tool off the shelf.
So wait, looking at these off-the-shelf tools, I do see a glaring issue here.
What's that?
Well, a generic contract reviewer, no matter how well engineered it is, doesn't actually know my company's specific risk tolerances. It doesn't know my client's quirks. So if we just use the off-the-rack template, aren't we just settling for a generic output?
You absolutely would be, which is exactly why the library is explicitly defined as your starting point, not your ceiling.
Okay.
And this brings us to the modification phase. This is where we bridge the gap between a generic AI output and true enterprise-grade utility.
The tailor's room. So how exactly do we take this generic suit and tailor it to fit perfectly?
Well, the mechanics of modification rely on how large language models actually process specific tokens. Every skill in the library is ultimately just a text file. And embedded within that text file system prompt are placeholder variables, essentially fill-in-the-blank brackets.
Let's walk through a tangible scenario for this. The framework uses a specific example of modifying the contract reviewer for a joint venture, right? Or a specific client, like K for BHP.
Yes. So you open the text file. The whole process takes perhaps 15 minutes. You scan the system prompt, and you locate the placeholder variable that says bracket contractor bracket. You delete the placeholder, and you type in KFIR. You find the bracket for principal and type in BHP. But most importantly, you locate the bracket for contract standard and replace it with the exact legal framework governing your project.
Like ALIS 4000-1997, which is the example they use.
Exactly.
I want to pause on that standard for a second because ASIS 4000-1997 is a widely used Australian standard for construction contracts. And for a human to manually review a subcontract against that standard is incredibly cognitively demanding,
It's incredibly dense legalese.
full of interdependent clauses. So by explicitly typing that standard into the system prompt, what is actually happening under the hood of the AI?
You are drastically narrowing the AI's probability distribution. By explicitly defining ASIS 4000-1997, you're forcing the neural network to anchor its semantic understanding entirely within that specific legal framework.
It's not just guessing anymore.
Right. It stops pulling general contracting knowledge from the broader internet and focuses its computational weight on the specific clauses, notice periods, and risk allocations inherent to that exact standard. You are tuning the instrument.
Now, I can hear the skeptical listener pushing back here. They're thinking, look, my days are packed in back-to-back meetings. The generic template gave me a decent summary that was, 80% of the way there. Why should I burn 20 minutes digging through a text file and swapping out brackets just to get that last 20%?
Because that final 20% is exactly where the human labor is hiding.
Oh, that's good.
A generic summary is a novelty. It still requires a human to copy it into a Word document, reformat the tables, cross-reference the company's specific legal clauses, and manually polish it before it can actually be sent to a client.
Right. You still have to do the work.
Exactly. Taking 20 minutes to swap out those variables and dictate the exact output format means the AI generates a company-specific document that is ready to be filed immediately. The tailoring phase is what transforms a neat parlor trick into an actual workflow asset.
That distinction is phenomenal. It's really the difference between an AI giving you homework and an AI doing the work.
Precisely.
Okay, so we know how to use the pre-built tools, and we know how to tailor them. But what happens 6 months from now when a completely novel problem arises? You search the contractor OS library, and the tool you need simply does not exist. There's no template to modify.
Then you graduate to the architect level. You build the tool from the ground up.
Which sounds super intimidating, but the framework lays out a highly structured process to accomplish this in under an hour. You don't just open a blank document and start free-writing instructions, right? You use the RASCEF framework, RASCEF.
Right. It is an acronym that forces discipline into your prompt engineering. It stands for role, audience, situation, constraints, examples, and format.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me, because using this RASCEF framework isn't coding. It's so much more akin to, like, casting a method actor in a stage play.
I love that comparison.
Yeah, you're giving the AI a specific character to inhabit. That is the role. You tell it who is sitting in the theater watching the audience. You provide the backstory and the setting of the scene, the situation.
Right.
You give the actor strict boundaries on what they are absolutely not allowed to do on stage, the constraints. You show them tapes of previous award-winning performances to study the examples. And finally, you tell them exactly how the script needs to look when it is handed in the format. You are essentially directing a highly controlled performance.
And to see that direction in practice, we can look at the framework's example of building a custom variation register populator. Now, a variation register tracks changes to the scope of work and the associated costs. It's highly meticulous data entry.
Okay, so let's apply the actor's motivation to this.
Sure. The role is defined as an expert contract administrator. The situation dictates that the AI will receive daily site reports as raw input. The format demands the output perfectly matches the exact column structure of the company's proprietary register. But the true architectural power lies in the constraints.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that. What happens algorithmically if I'm in a rush and I just, skip the constraint section?
Well, when an AI hallucinates or generates incorrect data, it is almost always because its search parameters were too wide. Without constraints, the AI looks at a blank space in the data and guesses to try and please you.
It makes things up.
Yes. By writing hard constraints, you build impenetrable walls around the AI's logic. So in this specific tool, you might write constraints like, if an item's cost exceeds $5,000, you must flag it as priority 1, or you must never assume a date. If the date is missing from the daily report, output date required.
Wow. You are literally encoding your personal business logic right into the machine.
Precisely. But creating the logic is only step 1. The framework mandates rigorous testing before deployment. You cannot just assume your instructions are perfect. You must run 5 different highly representative daily reports through your newly built skill,
Why specifically 5?
because it forces you to hit the edge cases. One report might be perfectly formatted, but another might have missing weather data. A third might have a massive, unexpected cost overrun.
So you're seeing how it reacts.
Exactly. You watch how the AI actor handles those different scenarios, you refine the constraints based on where it stumbles, and only when it handles all 5 flawlessly do you save it as a production-ready skill.
Okay, so we've cast our actor, we've rehearsed the play, and the performance is flawless. We have this custom-built, enterprise-grade AI tool, job done, right? We just hit the run it forever button and walk away.
That is actually the most dangerous assumption you can make. And it brings us back to the final piece of the tagline. Improve it always, because a project is a living, breathing organism.
Right, conditions change.
Constantly. You might bring on a new subcontractor. The principal client might suddenly demand a completely different reporting format. If your tools remain static while your project evolves, the tools become obsolete.
And what happens then? Human nature takes over. People realize the skill is outputting the wrong format, so instead of fixing the root cause, they run the skill, get the bad output, and then type out a manual prompt saying, actually, can you reformat this for the new client?
And you are right back to the Friday afternoon nightmare.
Exactly.
You've reintroduced the friction you worked so hard to eliminate. You must update the core file, and this requires stringent version control.
Oh, let's talk about the graveyard of great ideas. I want you, the listener, to think about your own workplace. How many times has someone on your team, maybe even you, built an incredible Excel macro or a brilliant automation script, and it revolutionized your week?
We've all seen it.
But it lived entirely on your personal desktop. And when you moved to a different project or someone else needed to do the task, that tool was completely useless to them. It just died in a silo.
The personal hard drive is where automation goes to die. If we look at the naming conventions required by this framework, they are designed specifically to prevent that chaos. A file isn't named Contract Reviewer Final.
Or final version 2.
Right, it's named with architectural precision, like KFIRFIP, Contract Reviewer 12/2025-06.txt.
Oh, wow. It captures the company, the project code, the exact tool, the version number, and the date it was minted.
Yes. So when the client changes a reporting standard, you update the text file and save it as V2 with a new date. You keep version 1 as a historical record, but version 2 becomes the active engine. And crucially, this file must live in a shared organizational folder, whether that is a Google Drive or a SharePoint directory.
But just putting a file in a shared drive doesn't mean anyone is actually going to use it.
Which is why the framework insists on active deployment. It recommends running a dedicated 30-minute team session whenever a new suite of skills is finalized. The true return on investment for AI workflows is not about making one single project manager ridiculously fast.
What is it about?
The ROI is team-wide standardization.
It creates a shared brain for the entire organization. When the newest junior hire and the 20-year veteran senior manager both click the subcontract reviewer button, they are both pulling from the exact same repository of encoded company excellence. The floor for quality is raised instantaneously across the board.
That is the ultimate goal of productionizing knowledge.
All right, as we bring this deep dive in for a landing, I want to crystallize the 3 core takeaways from the material we've covered today. Number 1, skills are simply packaged, perfected prompts. They eliminate the cognitive load of setup, giving you the same high-quality output every time with a single click.
Perfect.
Number 2, never settle for the generic template. Taking just 10 to 20 minutes to tailor a pre-built skill with your specific project variables and legal standards causes the output quality to leap from a novelty to a true workflow asset.
Absolutely essential.
And number 3, version control and shared storage are non-negotiable. A skill only generates ROI if it is maintained and accessible to the entire team.
You know, looking at the totality of this system, it does raise a rather profound question, one that sits just beneath the surface of the text, and one that is absolutely vital to consider as we move forward.
No. Let's hear it.
Well, if we are highly successful at this, if we perfectly encode our company's best practices, our complex legal risk tolerances, and our rigorous standards into these automated one-click buttons, what happens to the human knowledge of how to do the work manually?
Oh, that is a heavy thought.
Right. If the AI skill becomes a new standard operating procedure, how does that fundamentally alter the way we train the next generation of workers? If a junior employee comes into the industry and only ever knows how to push the subcontract reviewer button, Will they possess the underlying critical thinking required to spot a bad contract if the AI happens to make a mistake?
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying paradox. By automating our expertise, do we risk accidentally outsourcing our understanding? That is something I really want you to mull over as you analyze your own daily workflows this week. Keep digging into these systems, keep questioning how they are fundamentally changing the architecture of your profession, and above all, keep automating the boring stuff so you have the time and energy to focus on the work that actually requires a human mind. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.